I mean, this is a really great question, and um, I'm sorry, my pomo's still screaming at me. We're going over a little bit here. Here, let me silence that for you for 1 second, so you guys are not like OCDing, because you will, right? You're gonna be like, oh my god, can you please make it stop? Make it stop. Okay, stop. There's a video on that, by the way, on the pomo. Yeah, you can have one. You can download. You can run your own. Set it all up. I show you how I'll do that on one of the YouTube videos. Okay, so should I work on the weekends or will it burn me out? And I'm answering this on a Sunday, streaming on Twitch, writing code. Um, yes, it will burn you out. No, you shouldn't work on the weekends unless you want to. No, you shouldn't work on the weekends unless you have a break on another day. And some people do, right? Never plan to work on the weekends, right? So I have to be careful about this because I actually just the other day I said this. First of all, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, as usual. Work from home, remote work is fluid. It and allows work-life balance. Customizations. Okay, so for example, there's a strong amount of time where there's a strong opinion that you have to work 9 to 5. I mean, that's an old school thing. Working from home, and working from home has come under serious attack recently because of Elon Musk, and I don't want to talk about that. We're talking about burnout. Elon Musk came out and said you are required to work 40 hours on site minimally, but he implied that you should, if you really care about your job, you should be working a lot more than that from home also. So you're allowed to work from home on your own time, and when you're here, you come here for 40 hours. But regularly, he's really implying you should have 80 hours. I've had people. I'm not kidding. I've had. I think it was IBM. When I signed up with IBM, they said, and you got to understand, I was working 90 hours on Nike.com. This is a true story. I'm going to tell you a story. Okay. I'm going to tell you a very sad story. All right. So, and I was in my 20s. Actually, I was in my late 20s. Here's the story. I was working on Nike.com. And while I was on, so Nike.com, there was a big push to do this thing called Nike ID. And if you know about it, you go back and look about it. It was like they would customers could go to Nike.com and they could order any kind of logo they wanted or any kind of words, or they could monogram their shoes, their Jordans or whatever. And it would get printed on the back of their shoes. It would get printed on the back of their shoes. And the amount of supply chain, I can't even begin to tell you the complexity of this thing. And Phil Knight, the dick that he is, oh my God, I realize now how big a dick he was and is, got on television on an average. They had a whole news crew there and everything, and he announced the release of these things, and we were like, "This is nowhere near being finished. How can he just come out and say, well, we're going to make sure it's getting done on time?" And he did that whole thing that Elon is doing right now, and he said, "No, we're going to make it happen." Blah blah blah. So, and I had 2 young toddler kids at home, and I had my beautiful, wonderful, ex-wife that I was married to at the time. And she worked really hard, and she's, as a young mom, she was, frazzled a lot. And, but at the time I deeply loved her. It was actually one of the better years of our lives. But I was stuck at work, and I was hungry, and I was in my 20s, and I was super, ambitious. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so this is what they did. And I've told the story before, but I got to tell it again. To joke about how much work they were asking us to do, they would bring, that tape, the crime scene tape. They would bring the crime scene tape, and they would tape us into our cubicles. And then they would bring us, like, I am not kidding, they would bring us salmon locks and caviar, and because they had lots of money, and they wanted us to produce, and they kept bringing. I got paper cuts on my fingers. I remember. I will never forget. I had these 2 huge Java reference manuals on either side of me because I was writing some Java code for all this, because I was doing the middleware back then, and And I had these paper cuts. I had these huge paper cuts from like turning the pages all the time because I had to go through and like do all this stuff, and I was exhausted. And you don't code well when you're tired, even if you're young. And all these people were there. We're working overnight, and they brought in these superstars, the new SQL to save the day, and they made everything into triggers and procedures instead of like having it be proper middleware, just because we wanted to get. It was such a fucking clusterfuck of horrible software. But the guy that was doing the sort of procedures in SQL was getting shit done faster because he didn't have to deal with Java, first of all, and because of all these other things. So he was like putting stuff in there, and he became kind of the hero and the blah blah blah. And amidst all of this, my wife at the time was like, "What the hell? You're never here. You're like working 90 hours a week." I said, "Yeah, honey, but I got to keep this job and everything, and I got to keep going." And this is how the story goes. So this is what happened. So one Sunday, just like today, we're talking about the weekend, right? One Sunday, we had to drive like 60. So we moved to Beaverton, Oregon, which is where Nike is. It's kind of Silicon Forest, they call it. But in Gresham, Oregon is where my family lived, her family lived. And we were going back there for a nice Sunday dinner, which we used to always do. We would have these great Sunday dinners when the grandkids would play with their grandkids. And it was just really fun. And we'd wear sweats, and we'd sit around the potbelly stove. And sometimes we'd play, Quake downstairs with the cousins. And I mean, it was just a really fun family time on Sundays. And I have fantastic memories of that. I mean, the divorce was horrible, but I have fantastic memories of those family times that I had when my kids were young, and we were relatively young, and I don't regret those at all. I am so glad that I have those memories, right? Because I had no idea that I was going to never see my kids again practically. I mean, that's not true, but I got divorced in my 40s, and stuff was going to happen eventually in my life that if I hadn't taken advantage of those weekends. Okay, so given that atmosphere, let me finish the story. So we're driving to one of these Sunday things. I'm all excited and we're happy. I mean, you got to understand, as a Mormon, you spend 3 hours in church every Sunday, 3 hours continuously in church, and you don't eat during that time. So you're starving when you come out of there. Everybody's all good. So, and then you have this nice meal. So like every Sunday has got this little Thanksgiving feeling because you come back and you eat and you're like, I have just fasted for the last 3. And if it's the first 3 hours, I'm not kidding. And if it's the first Sunday, it's fast Sunday. And that day you don't even eat for 24 hours. And you give all that money to the poor and to the church. And you fast. Your whole family fasts unless you have some medical condition, so you can't fast. If you don't fast and you don't pay a proper fast offering, you can't go to the temple, which means you can't go to heaven. I know. We'll talk about Mormons later another time. So we were like really looking forward to going out and having this this meal with my in-laws, but it was like it was such a long ways away. So it was like a 40-minute drive to get there, and I had, we needed to pick something up from work on the way. And I can't remember what it was. I honestly can't. And so I had to stop in at Nike. So I stopped in at Nike, and because it was Nike.com, our offices were like right on the main strip, like right on the main drive when you drive in. I think we were in the, I can't remember if it was the Armstrong building. The disgraced Lance Armstrong, who had his own line and everything. It was. I think we were in the Armstrong building. Anyway, so I mean, you can go look at Nike campus and see. And I walked in there, and it was supposed to be just my kids. I had kids in the car, and our minivan was acting up. It needed a new U joint, and my wife was waiting in the car. The car was on. I was just supposed to run in. Right. This is a true story. So I ran in to go grab something from my desk, and my manager and all the other team was there, and they all said, "Oh my God, thank God you're here. We really need you." And I'm like, "I gotta go. I'm having dinner with the in-laws. I gotta go. It's Sunday." They go, "No. We really need you. You have to stay." And they said it just like that. They go, "No, this is an emergency. We need you to stay." And I know the name of the woman who said it, who was my manager, and she was amazing. I loved her a lot. She was my team lead. Sorry, not my manager. My manager was also another woman, very nice woman. And the rest of my team, I was the only man on the team actually. And so this is how it went down. This is so scary. So I was in there talking. I was like just talking and talking and talking, right? And I don't know if she could see me through the window or not, but my ex-wife was wondering it took me so long. We had toddlers in the car, and my ex-wife was hungry. We had been waiting. We hadn't eaten dinner or anything. We were going to the in-laws to eat, so we were all hungry. So my ex-wife, oh my god, she was like a monster. If you get her hangry, oh my god, she was like the worst hangry, and so was I. But she was like hangry. We were waiting to go see her parents, and I was like, according to her perspective, dicking around and at work. And I was trying to justify why I couldn't go in. And I was trying to make a decision. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting an ultimatum here. I'm going to lose my job if I walk out of here. I mean, I seriously thought I was going to lose my job if I walked out of there. That's how serious they made it sound, that we needed to hit this deadline that day. And I wasn't even supposed to be coming, and it was Sunday. And I was already kind of getting blackballed by the team because I was taking the weekend off to spend with my family. And this has a happy ending, I promise. So then I went. So my ex comes in, and my ex is coming in looking for a fight. She's ultra hangry. I mean, I wish you could see a picture of her. I'll look one up for her. And she just came in, and she was ready for a fight. She was like, "Okay, let's go." She said it just like that. Uh, uh, yeah, I didn't sell it before it was ready. That's what I wanted to say. But you got to understand, I had young kids. I was only making 30 grand a year, and I thought I was rich, and I thought I was making all this money. It turns out, fast forward, I made double that. I got recruited into another company for double that within a month, and I'm going to get there. So, I mean, I thought that my whole world was going to collapse if I didn't do everything they told me. And that's kind of what this story is about. There's this irrational fear, particularly in young parents, where, if you don't do what people tell you to, that you're going to end up penniless, and your kids are not going to have immunizations, and everybody's going to die. And, you're the only breadwinner because you're a Mormon, which means only the guy makes the money. That's canon. They tell you that's your job. And so everything depended on me. And so I thought I didn't ever want to do anything to rock the boat, because I didn't want to, ruin ourselves, which makes you a very horrible negotiator. Right. So I was in there, and my ex, I kid you not. So this is what she said. I remember some of the lines that she said because it was kind of burned in my head. So my ex walks into this room, and she sees all of these other women there. And I'm not kidding. They were women. There were 3 other women there. And I was, there, and I said, and I just didn't know what to say. And they were saying, and then so finally my team lead goes, well, I don't know, man, you can, it's like, whatever. It's like, but we really need you. I mean, we really need you. And, and so my ex-wife, and I am not paraphrasing, she started individually attacking all of them. She goes, wait a second. She says to my team, she goes, I don't know about you, but we have a life, and we need to go have that life together. And y'all don't have any lives here. And this might be the thing your whole life, but we do. And she goes, and you, I want my husband back. That's what she said. I want my husband back. My husband is here all the time. All he does is spend time with you, and I want him back. I got kids. I have a family. It's the weekend. It's Sunday. We're going to go have family dinner. And you're telling him he has to stay. And she just like fucking lit into them. She lit into them. She didn't swear because she was Mormon. And then during the middle of that, she was like shaking. She was so angry. Okay, just a sec. I'm telling my story. Don't interrupt. Don't. Okay, go. Okay, I'll finish my story. You can listen from there, but don't break my story, Fred. Okay, so anyway, so there was this little blonde girl, right? One of the ones that I worked with, and I say little, but she was literally little. She was little, and she was, really nice and everything. And in the middle of Alicia tirading against all of these others, she goes, well, you don't have kids, and you don't know what it's like, and you don't understand. And and then my team lead, who was, a lesbian who lived by herself, said, you're talking about talking to a Mormon woman, mother, right? And she said to her, she goes, well, that was your choice. And she's like, she just got so angry. She was like screaming at the top of her lungs. She's like, my choice, huh? She was like, do you have any idea what it's like to be a mother? Do you have any idea what it's like to take care of people and all this stuff? And then the other cute little blonde, and she literally was cute and a little blonde. That's not a diminutive. She said, I have a dog. And she goes, "You have a dog? You have a fucking dog? Do you have any idea what it's like to raise a dog compared to raising two children?" And she went fucking off. She went fucking off. And the other girl was just like, she was quiet over there. She was not saying anything. She was like, and then she went storming out of there. I mean, if she had had a gun, this is how I usually tell this. If she had had a gun, she would have mowed them all down. She was so pissed off. You can understand this had been bubbling in her for a long time because I hadn't been home, because I had been biking in and working 90 hours a week to get this thing done. And she'd been all by herself raising these two kids, with almost no family support, because we moved away from her parents because we were like, 90 minutes away or 60 minutes away, something like that. And this, so she was pissed, and she walked out. She walked out like, just poof, she like bounced through the door. She goes, "I'm leaving." She goes, "I'm leaving. I don't care. You can do whatever you want." And she said that, she looked straight at me and she goes, "You can do whatever you want. You can make a choice. You can do your decision, but I'm leaving and I'm going to go have dinner. And if you want to, you can just stay here." And I was like, she's going to let me go home, right? So she went through the door and she was on her way to the car and she was going to get in that car and take off. And so I, this kind of, wishy-washy guy, I said, I was Mormon at the time. And I said, "Fuck this, it's not worth it." And I said it that loudly. I said it loudly so they all heard it. And I went out and I got into the car and I drove and we were just quiet. We went the whole way. I don't remember anything else about the day. But here's where it gets interesting. So I completely thought that her outburst and my "fuck it" comment meant that I would be fired the next day. I 100% expected to walk in to no job the next day. And I was terrified. I was terrified that I was going to have to go do whatever it took to make ends meet. And I had done some pretty weird, drastic things, having, learned Russian and not been able to make money doing that. And you know what happened? The first thing I walked in, I went, "Okay, here it comes." And they had my manager, my senior, not my team lead, my manager. I walked in and nobody wanted to talk and everything. And it said, "So-and-so wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "Oh shit, here it comes." So God, I'm having a hard time telling this story because I was really nervous when I did this. My wife's right there listening. And I went up to sit in my manager's room, and I sat in the chair, and she said, "I understand that we, there was kind of an issue yesterday." And one of the things that she went off on, I forgot to say this. One of the things that my ex went off on was that our car was broken and we didn't have money for the U-joint. It's going to cost us. I mean, she just started laying out everything that was wrong. And because I wasn't there, I couldn't fix it. I'm the man. I'm supposed to take care of the car, and I don't have any time to fix the car. And she's feeling, vulnerable. She didn't say that, but she's feeling vulnerable because the car wasn't being taken care of. Blah blah blah. So I have to. This part of the story I forgot. And so my manager says, not that I'm fired. She goes, "So I understand that your car is having trouble, and it's something about the U-joint or something like that, and that you're having a hard time making ends meet and being able to pay for that. And is that true?" And I went, "Yeah." And she says, "We'd like to pay for your repairs." I mean, when I asked this, I don't remember if I asked if I was getting fired or not, but I wanted to ask, "Wait a second. So you're not firing me?" And she goes, "We understand that there's a lot of stresses on you and your family, and we want to pay for your car." And I said, "Well, okay, but it's like $2,000-$3,000." And she goes, "Yeah, that's fine. We want to do that for you." Now later, looking back at it, I realized how much they were taking advantage of me. I was making 30 grand a year on their premier project that was being touted by the CEO. They were paying me 30 grand a year to work on the biggest project with the highest publicity in all of Nike.com, all of it. And they were paying me 30 fucking grand a year in the 90s. In the 90s, I should have been making double or triple that back then. So they were already taking advantage of me, and I had no idea because I was young and stupid. And I was even working on the weekends for them. I was working 90 hours a week. My total hourly wage was like ridiculously low because they had convinced me that the only thing that I could do in life was work for them. Just like Elon tries to do with his people. He's like, if you really care about making the world a better place, then you need to put in 90 hours a week and only get paid for 30 of them. And it's bullshit. It's total bullshit. And so, and they realized that, oh God, he's going to figure out this is bullshit. So they placated me, and I was like, okay, fine. So I went down and they, my team lead obviously had some communication with her about what had went down. And by the way, my team lead, I made her sound like a horrible person. She was amazing. She was really, really amazing. She was a huge U2 fan. She would always go to the concerts and everything. She was one of my best friends ever that I've ever worked with. And she was under extreme pressure too. And for her to have gone to my manager and had that talk meant that she actually cared. And that she realized that we just had this breakdown and that there was nothing personal at all about this. This was not about my association with my coworkers. They were fucking awesome. I really, really loved them. Truly, truly. We would go out and we would go, eat together and stuff. And I really, really, really loved that job, except for the SQL guy that was some newbie that they brought in to try to rescue the day and got all the credit. And even though he sucked, he actually threatened me when I left. He threatened me. He made a physical threat of violence. He said, if you ever tell anybody anything bad about me after you leave, I will find you. That's what he said. He said, I will find. I am not kidding. That actually happened. Because it was just such a cutthroat kind of situation. I'm so glad to be out of it. So let me fast forward. So I lasted, in the sequel, yeah. So I lasted in that job probably another 2 or 3 months, right? Because I don't know. I have no idea why he would do that. It was the weirdest thing, but I swear to God it happened. In fact, when it happened, I didn't understand what he was doing. I was literally walking out the door. He's like, it was almost like I had some secret about him that I could expose and make him look bad. And he was literally threatening me. And I was like, what the hell? I just shook my head. It's like, get the fuck out of my face. So, but between that time and in between the time of the thing with my ex-wife and the time that I left and got the threat from the SQL specialist that had left, in between there, in front of them, had immediately, really, yeah. No, I wish I knew his name, dude. I totally would. I would totally dox him right now. But in between that time, in between there, someplace, they had a meeting because the Nike.com senior management started to realize that, there was all kinds of politics. They put a librarian in charge of all of Nike.com. They had no web development experience at all. Because she had, connections with some people someplace. It was the strangest thing. Don't ever work for Nike. That's one of the main things I'm going to tell you right now. Don't ever work for Nike. They are a disastrously bad, evil company. And I had some good moments there, but for the most part, oh my God. So anyway, after this thing went down with me, there was a lot of pressure. There's other things going on too that I wasn't aware of. And so they had a meeting. They had an all hands meeting. They got like 80 people together or whatever it was. And they put us all into the main room, which we weren't allowed to be in, by the way. That was only for the cool Nike.com people. And we got to go in this meeting and we're all sitting, and I didn't make it to the meeting. I'm so glad I wasn't at the meeting because I was one of those meetings where I said, no, fuck it. I'm going to stop and I'm going to go, I'm going to spend time with my wife and stuff. And so they brought everybody in, and I've told the story before, but I'm going to say it again. They said, they all got us. Everybody was like, oh, okay. We had no idea what the meeting's about. We were like, oh God, because we knew the Nike.com thing was coming up, or it had already been delivered. I can't remember. But the stress had really, really, really been pronounced, and it had affected the whole culture of the whole team. And they brought us into the room, and the manager said, we were all expecting like a raise or something to be more motivating and something. And this is what they told us. They did in Elon. They brought us into the room and they said, okay, we understand that a lot of you are feeling a lot of pressure. We understand that you are going through all kinds of, different life stresses and things like that. And we want to know that we empathize with you. And then this is where the Elon thing came. They said, this is a .com, just like that. And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? And they're like, what we mean by that is that, like any other, and this, you're talking about right before the crash of 2000. Right before the crash of 2000, the entire world was all .com nuts, right? And everybody was working too hard, and they were dumping money into dumb shit that didn't matter. This was pre.com failure, right? But there was I would say that this is probably the beginning of the bro culture and the .com Silicon Valley stuff that really hit hard. It was kind of that way before, but in the .com era, things got kind of nuts. And so everybody was doing .coms and they had not started falling yet, right? So their thing was, well, if you want to work for a .com, you've got to put in the hours. And that's what they said. They said, look, we know that working for a .com is not the culture that everybody wants. We know that .coms are for a particular type of individual, and that is what we are. We are a .com, and we're sorry, but that is the way it's going to be going forward, and we just want to manage that expectation properly. You are expected to work just like you would be at any other .com. Fast forward like 2 years, complete .com collapse, multiple bankruptcies, everybody left, just a total disaster. That's what happens when you push people like that. And that's what's going to happen to Twitter eventually, if it hasn't already happened. If you push people like that, they just can't. So guess what happened? The next day, I am not kidding. The next day, about half of those people, at least the guy who left, this is what he told me, right? So one of the guys he was in a different department, not an immediate department, but he was still in .com, and he knew of my Java stuff, and he kind of looked up to it and stuff, and he knew about me. He was kind of following my career. I think it's because he wanted to learn Java, frankly, but he was more on the other side, and he quit. The next day he quit, and he told me that something like a dozen or more people quit the next fucking day. The next fucking day they all quit, and they said, we don't want anything to do with this. If this is normal, then thank you for letting us know we're getting out of here. And that week, I got a call from a recruiter, and this is a true story. This is not an exaggeration. I got a call from a recruiter who had just placed this guy, best recruiter I've ever had, by the way. I've had good recruiters, and my current recruiter is really good, but this guy was just over the top. He was amazing. He was from Texas, actually, and he had been told by this other guy, a friend of mine. He goes, oh my God, you want to hire this guy? So I got a cold call from this recruiter, and I had been getting called from recruiters all the time at Nike.com. You just did, because you're working for a .com and you're working in Java in the 90s. You're a really hot commodity. I should have been making triple what I was making, but I didn't know it. And so I was on the phone. This is a true story. I was on the phone with a recruiter, and I said, look, I don't have enough time. I'm still under the gun. I'm always under the gun here. I said, please just don't talk to me unless you can at least double my salary. So if you can get me 75, and I had a strategy. I would tell people really unusually high numbers, because I just want to get rid of them, because I want to get back to work. And there were recruiters who'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, that's out of range for us. And this guy goes, done. When can you be here? And can you fly to Dallas next week? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, easily. I can easily get you that. I'm like, okay, call me back at home. So he called me back at home, and I remember sitting on the dryer in the laundry room talking through the possibilities with my ex-wife, and we were so excited. We're like, oh my God. We were like so excited, and we were like, we were going to literally, I was going to make an extra $35,000 from what I was already making. I mean, I was more than doubling my salary. And so I said, yeah, well, and they paid an all expense paid trip for me to go to Dallas. I interviewed with a bunch of other interns. I accepted the job from IBM. I actually interviewed with a bunch of other interns fresh out of college, and I ended up getting like 6,000 more than them because I was seasoned or something. And then I got the job, and they sent us to New York for 30 days of $80 per day per diem. And we did all this planning, and we went to all these, New York shows and everything. I just felt so good about it. I mean, even though my ex was still home, with the kids during that month. And then while I was there, and I remember because I was installing SUSE Linux, Mandrake actually, and I was like doing the thing. And while I was there, the position that they hired me for, which was to be a subject matter expert in Java for web development on contracts that were being fulfilled for the finance sector in Charlotte, which I then later ended up living in, this is completely unrelated. Yeah. And I was, we were, they pulled it, the project completely evaporated while I was in training. So I flew back to Portland or to Beaverton, and I was like, what am I going to do here? And I immediately had to find it. I went on the bench, so I was still getting paid. I hadn't even got my bearings. I had to use mainframe systems to even look up job postings. And I was like, shit, I mean, I don't have a job. They're paying me, but I don't have a job. I said, well, what happens if I'm on the bench? Well, eventually they'll ask you to move on, or they'll, So they found I had to find my own job. So I got hired for this ridiculous, salary in the finance sector, which I thought was super high for me. It really wasn't actually. I found out later, and then I had to find another job. So I'm in my closet, and I'm not kidding. I put an electric plug in my closet so I could get away from my toddler kids, so I could work from home, because my ex-wife used to tell me to watch the kids while she went to the store. And I'm like, I have to work here, honey. I got to find a job, and I found a job doing system administration, and I've been teaching myself Linux in the garage for years, and I got a job doing system administration. So I went in and I interviewed with this guy Ross, who was the best manager I've ever had ever, and I interviewed with him. I said, look, I've never done system administration professionally, but I've been doing Linux forever. And he hired me. Took a chance on me as a junior system administrator. I felt like I was way over my head. I was working on Solaris and raised floor and learning what RAID 5 was and all this stuff. But I still had a job, and I was still making the same amount of money that I'd been hired in on, even though I got hired in on a software development salary, which is another secret. Software developers make more money than operations people across the board, because they're usually adding value to the company, but it's an on or off game. When it gets cold, when the economy gets cold, everybody wants operations people to keep the stuff running. They keep their jobs. The people that lose their jobs are the contractors and the developers, because they're making new stuff, and there's no money in the budget for new stuff anymore. They have to so they cancel all the new software development projects, and they put all that money into the stuff to keep the stuff running. So the moral of the story here is, do both. Be able to be an operations person if you have to be, and also somebody who knows how to code, because then that makes you a rock star on the operations team, because now you actually know how to code instead of some of the operations people that I've worked with. So that's really the end of my story. I ended up getting the IBM job, and then I went from there, and the rest is history. I mean, I did a lot of other things after that, but so I ended up making more money. If I hadn't worked on the weekend, and if I had stuck up for myself a little bit more, not only would I have been making double the money earlier, but I would never have had that fight. The relationship with my ex-wife at the time might not have been as strained. I would have spent more times. There were times I drove out of my driveway, and my ex would be there with my two toddlers, and I'm gonna have a hard time talking about this, and I would like cry my eyes out, because I knew I wasn't going to see him again. Because I love my kids, but I couldn't spend any time with them, because I had to do these fucking 90-hour work weeks, and I can see her with my two toddlers, like, waving to me, while I was driving away to go off and work until like 9-10 p.m. that night. And I was probably not going to see him until I went to bed. And I would come home, and I would just be so depressed and couldn't sleep. Sometimes I played Quake until late, and I just watched my kids sleeping. Or sometimes I make it back while they were getting in bed, and I pretend like I didn't have any arms. I'd put my arms inside of my shirt and do a whole play for them to get them to laugh and stuff, just because I never saw them. I would see them for like 20, 30 minutes. And then I was like, no, I'm not doing it anymore. And I got a lot more balance after that. But don't. So the answer to this video is, the conclusion of this video is, don't burn yourself out. Now, I've been working lately. I've been ironically and somewhat hypocritically working 15 hours on my own on the keg stuff and everything like that. But my kids are in college. My wife is pulling double overnighters doing her stuff, and we sync up all the time. We do things. But there are times when you can put more time in, right, Doris? You don't feel like neglected, do you? Please don't tell me you feel neglected. Wait, was that a fuck no? You just said fuck no? Whew. All right. So my wife's answer, I asked her, are you feeling neglected?
Why?
She says fuck no, she doesn't feel neglected. Why?
Because I have a life.
Because you have a life. Oh boy. Because you have a life. So, a lot of you have young kids at home and stuff like that. Oh my God, here she comes again. Here she comes. All right, come here.
Okay.
Come here. She's got an opinion to share, apparently.
If I was sitting around waiting for you to have validation or to have meaning in my life,
Yeah.
I don't put all my hopes and dreams and everything on you.
Yeah.
You're just here along for my ride.
Yeah. We play with the Medivici comparison, but that's
We're
just
comparison. We're companions.
We're companions.
We're
and we're co-equals kind of thing. Yeah.
And it's nice to have the stability of knowing someone cares about you and has your back, so you can go on and do great things.
Right. And I remember you staying at Target probably longer than you wanted to, so that I could do the skill stack thing. And now it's just kind of my turn to help you get on your thing. And then, by the way, she kicked ass at the.
Just
I'm not going to say.
I had a collector come and did very well. That's all.
Okay, that's all I have to say about that. She had a collector come. Can we kiss? No. what is this? Pay-per-view? Uh, that's the end of that YouTube video. So the answer is, you do you. You know, if you don't, but there is one thing I will really warn you about. Do not miss the young years with your kids.
Absolutely.
The young years with your kids. Look, when they hit to be, when they're teenagers, you know, okay, maybe they can do without you a little bit more. And then when they're in college, they really don't want you around. I mean, let's be real. They really don't. 5 gifted subs for a kiss.
Let's put it this way: if you didn't spend the time with them little, they're not going to give a shit about you when
No.
they're teens.
No, if you didn't give a shit, that's totally true. And the one thing that I did right, I swear to God, I did this right. You can ask my kids if you want. But I made sure that I had time with them when they were really young. We would invent games, we would do things, and we would spend the weekends together. We did. Now, when they would go to bed, and they would because they were toddlers, right? So they go to bed early at 9 o'clock. It was like, oh, yay, goody. And I remember Max and I getting all excited because it was like time for us to do stuff, right? Because at 9 o'clock, the kids were in bed. We made sure the kids went to bed at 9 o'clock. That's why bedtime is so important, because we had time together, and we would, watch shows, and we would do our own projects. I would play video games, and she would watch her crappy TV or whatever, and or do whatever it is that she wanted to do. And sometimes we would fuck or whatever. I mean, we had that time together, and just make sure that you don't waste the years with your young children, because you never get those back. You're never going to get those back. And I think I did not have time with my children when they were teens because of the divorce. I was not around for that. I didn't get to see the proms and all of that stuff. Not even from a distance. I didn't get any of that. And my ex would say it was my own fault, and probably true, some of that, but I still had the time when I was young to go back to that. So don't waste that. That's all.